And then that brings me to...
Uh-oh.
I've been waiting for this. This is the segue. Name changes, right? Because you struggled with that just now. Power Pages and Power Apps Portals, that's just one example of things that changed its names. I have a question that's not a news or an update, but it's a question from me to you, being my mentor and everything. What do you do when stuff changes names? And you have this huge backlog of blog posts and videos and YouTubes and everything with the old names in it. The code is still the same, the hack is the same, the solution works, but the naming is all wrong. Do you take a copy of the blog post, create a new blog post, or you change the wordings? Because then SEO-wise, Google will punish you for do that if you do that. Or do you change the names in the existing blog post, but then if someone Googles or has bookmarks, the permalinks, you see where I'm coming from, right? What do you do?
Okay, so I have two answers for that. There's what I do with the community stuff, and then this is interesting. This is for Microsoft Docs because I've gotten this question before. So community stuff, I'm not sure what you do. For me, I don't go back and change all my old blog posts or anything like that. What I have seen from different people in the community, Megan does this, I think other MVPs do this. They'll actually have a disclaimer at the top saying the naming and the screenshots and whatever are record as of the date of recording and may change over time. I don't change, like for me, just to go back and change everything, I would just take forever. The odd time I've rewrote blog posts that were for a couple of years ago when they have a completely new interface and whatever, and I'll just say this is the new and improved version of that. For example, like my one blog post on setting up the SSRS report tools, I've rewritten that I think 3 times because that's changed a bit over the years. But that's so on the community side, it's just be impossible to maintain that. Like what do you do in terms of if a name changes?
Yeah, so I have a blog post about how to customize the sign-in page for Power Pages, for Power Apps Portals, which is one of my most popular blog posts ever. And now, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've gotten so many feedbacks just on the comments on the blog post and on my just regular emails or on LinkedIn that it's not working anymore. So I know that there's something, I need to do something with that blog post. The code is not working, so I need to redo it and check out what's happened. So probably something's happened with the source code or the code behind the scenes that this doesn't work anymore. And then I need to rewrite that blog post. And I'm not sure. Okay. I think I'll probably take a copy and then rewrite it and then fix it, because probably I would have some different wordings. I need to do new screenshots because it's outdated. So it will, in a sense, be a new blog post, but kind of the same. Some of the sentences and some of the text will probably be the same. So I'm very curious as to see what Google will do, or the search engine of your choice will do with that in terms of SEO, because it will punish you if you do copies of blog posts. So I'm not really sure. And then for our Power Pages is one thing, because we've said it. I say it all the time. If you're searching for content, search for Power Apps Portals, search for Dynamics 365 Portals, because that still exists and that code would still work in most cases. And then now, of course, once we are Power Pages Bootstrap 5 is implemented and that's all over the place, then that becomes a real issue, because then the code that you used to have possibly will not work anymore. Mm-hmm. So, and all the jQuery code, it will work, of course, but it's no longer dependent on jQuery. So you would want to use vanilla JavaScript instead of jQuery when you develop stuff for Power Pages going forward. So that is also something to consider. What kind of best practices are you actually putting out there? And if you do have old code lying around that you say is applicable to Power Pages and it's really not the best practice, then should you remove it? Should you rename it? Should you put a disclaimer on it? I think it's a question that a lot of people in the community need to think about.
Yeah, and it's I'm always don't fix it if it ain't broke. So even if that old code, even if there's a better way, if there's not any security or performance issues that are noticeable, if the old code works, go with it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, sometimes you got to go with good is good enough. So you don't always have to rip out and replace that code if the old stuff works. But I get what you're saying in terms of things like searching for dynamic CRM. I mean, people still call this CRM. CRM has not been a Microsoft term for over 5 years now.
Yeah, I know.
But that's how it is. Now, on the Microsoft side in Docs, and again, this is, just pulling back the curtains a little bit. When there's a name change coming down, first thing I do is get out of my soapbox and I yell at the team to say, the community hates it when you change the names and blah, blah, blah.
Thank you.
That, and I and I hear MVPs kind of say that all the time too. It's like, changing names causes disruption. As they say in Thomas the Train, it causes confusion and delay. So now, that being said, and sometimes they don't always respond as like, "Whoops, sorry, well, let's roll back that." Like that doesn't happen. So the name changes. So typically, what happens is if there is something like when we moved from Power Apps portals to Power Pages, when there's we will. The PMs will drive that there needs to be document changes because there's new updates. We'll go through, and sometimes there is a backlog to go through and do those name changes. As much as we try to avoid a search and replace, because that's when you end up with things like Dynamics 365 field service becoming Dynamics 365 column service, because you don't want those names to change. But it is a tedious process. There is a lot of, you are searching, you are editing. Okay, if I change the name here, does it make sense? And updating a lot of documents. If a document changes, so if you've bookmarked, and maybe you've noticed this, and maybe people have noticed this, if you've bookmarked a certain page in Docs, and you look at the URL and it still says like Power Apps Portal or Power Apps with /portals, but then you click on that bookmark, then you'll notice that it has been redirected to somewhere in Power Pages. So part of the process is, especially when we moved a lot of that documentation over to Power Pages, was there was moving it, there was editing it, making sure the naming conventions, double checking the screenshots, making sure they were updated. And I'll talk about screenshots in a minute. But there is also something called a redirection put in place. So if anybody does have bookmarks, we strive our best to make sure those bookmarks are maintained so you don't click and get a 404 error. What you want to get is the new document, and it should be fairly seamless. You'll just, I'm at this new document, but if you look at the URL, you'll notice that it is the more up-to-date modern URL. So that's, there is a big effort to make sure that renaming is done and is updated. Now on the screenshot side, this is kind of a point of debate from my point of view, and I have this argument with the teams, is there is the concept to keep the screenshots to a fairly minimum, because first off, and I do agree with this concept, is the documentation should describe things well enough that you don't necessarily need a screenshot. However, I'm extremely visual, and if it was up to me, we'd have a screenshot for each and every step. But that's not up to me. But there is stuff, and there's discussions in play to try to find ways to keep screenshots more up to date as things change, because there's nothing more, I love screenshots, but I also, as a consumer of docs, or if I'm reading a document and I see an old screenshot, and I'm looking at my screen and it's completely different and I get a little bit confused, that could be extremely frustrating as well. But you have to appreciate that to keep on top of these screenshot changes that's like fighting a forest fire. Once you kind of got one area settled down, there's another spot popping up. So we try our best, but that's why that's part of the day-to-day job as a content creator, is to not only create the new content but also to maintain and curate the old content, keeping these things in mind, like bookmarks and screenshots, and making sure it's all up to date. And it takes a team effort, and the PMs are great at this. And we'll get emails in saying, hey, well, this feature has been updated, or this feature is now out of preview into GA. Those are the types of things we need to go back and change, and those types of things. So two things. So yeah, to summarize, community side, I kind of let it go. There's understanding there, and then on the doc side, for sure, there's big efforts to keep on top of that.
Yeah. Then that's a good summary. And of course, that's what keeps you employed, isn't it? Changing and all the screenshots changing.